All right, everyone. Welcome to the 11th episode of the Rise 41 podcast. I'm your host, Gonzalo Herrero, and today I have the privilege of welcoming Nathalie Niddam or Niddam?
Niddam.
Niddam, gotta make sure. And she is a biohacker, nutritionist, epigenetic coach, longevity and peptide expert, and an authority on human optimization. She has a podcast available on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and all the usual places, and also leads her group, the Biohacking Superhuman Performance Community. So with that introduction, welcome, Nathalie, and please tell us a little bit about yourself.
Thank you so much for having me, Gonzalo. I really appreciate it. As you can see from the bio, I'm, kind of traveled a journey here. And, I initially got into this, I started off, I've always loved science. I've always been that person. And I studied physiology when I was in university, but I kind of got sidetracked a little bit through my adult life. I ended up working in business.
Oh, wow.
But I was always a fitness instructor. I always kind of kept a hand in it. And about 15 years ago, I decided, I'd had enough of the business thing. I wanted to go back to my roots. So I went back to school full time. I became a holistic nutritionist. And then from there, basically, doors started to open, and I, continued they tell you when you graduate that, this is the beginning of your learning journey. This is really your stepping stone. So, from there, I really leaned into the biohacking space. I got interested in epigenetics and genetics, and then I got interested in peptides and bioregulators, and I started my podcast about 4.5 years ago or so, and that's been... that ended up being really my sweet spot because it, as you can see, as you're experiencing, it allows you to talk to all kinds of people and really bring new information to your audience that can just expand their world in many interesting ways.
Excellent. So, given that our audience, this may be a new topic or subject matter, let's start with defining, so what are we talking about when we talk about biohacking?
Yeah, that's a great question. And I think it's one of those terms that's very polarizing, right? A lot of people have moved away from it. Like myself, my podcast used to be called Biohacking Superhuman Performance. Last May, we rebranded its Longevity with Nathalie Niddam.
Okay.
And just to kind of diffuse the energy around biohacking, that can be in some ways, people can find it quite aggressive. But all biohacking really means is that we are wanting to take control of our own outcome by looking at what are the external factors and external factors that are under our control that we can manipulate in order to give ourselves the best outcome for ourselves.
Okay, and one thing that I want to make sure that the audience understands is that this is in a realm in conjunction with, say, physiology, medicine, and the more quote-unquote traditional approaches to health that most people might be familiar with, correct?
Yeah, I mean, it most certainly is. The thing with the biohacking space, how it's really evolved, it's kind of broadened its reach, if you will, beyond the body, where we're talking more about the spirit, we're talking more about the mind, we're talking about the influence of our mindset and our thoughts on our physical body. And I think that these are things that have been known to people for generations that allopathic medicine has not really embraced particularly. And, they'll talk about things like stress can have a very negative impact on your immune system, for example, right? Mm-hmm. But there's, if I can offer your audience a kind of like a gateway drug book, there's a book called The Biology of Belief. There's another book called The Body Keeps the Score. And these books really start to introduce the idea that what your thoughts and your mind have a massive influence on your state of health, even in your ability to heal.
Right.
So you need it all, right? Doesn't mean you don't have to do the things like the physical things you have to do to heal, but at the same time, a positive, and everybody knows that positive person that seems to get through everything really easily.
Right.
Whereas you've got other people who are maybe, they're more, they're held back in many ways, maybe because of their life experience, which has influenced their outlook, it has influenced their beliefs in a negative way, and they just always seem to be struggling.
So one thing maybe that I'm getting out of this is that, for example, when you think of ancient practices that have made their way to now, that might not be easily scientifically or physically quantified, do still hold value. So, for example, meditation. Everyone knows about meditation, and nobody can tell me scientifically in a lab why, if you do medication, practice it, it has some measurable results, though. Is that what we're talking about?
100%. People have quantified meditation now. Like they're,
Oh.
you know, you listen to, if you looked into the work of a man like Joe Dispenza, he's documented cases of people who had incredible illness, who reversed their illness through meditation. Very powerful practices, right? Now, it takes belief, it takes commitment, it takes a lot of things. It doesn't mean necessarily, like, you can partner meditation with conventional treatment and get even better results, right? So it can be meditation, it could be breath work, it could be all this whole realm of what people think of as woo-woo, like the kind of the things that we can't kind of hang on to. I would say that conventional science has started to look at that. They've studied monks, they've studied, you know, they've shown that there's a couple of studies that show that, you know, with some of these very advanced monks, they can actually affect their physiology.
Right. I mean, we know people who can slow down their own heartbeat measurably, which is, again...
And actually, most people can.
Oh,
you know, I think most people can. If you become intentional and you breathe and you slow down your breath and you clear your mind, and you will notice that all of a sudden things will start to calm down. Like there are just simple breath work, like a box breath, right? Inhaling for 4, holding for 4, exhale for 4,
yes,
hold for 4. If you keep that going for a few cycles, your cortisol will drop. Your stress markers will drop. You will find yourself starting to calm down, and you will find yourself in a position where, number one, you can make better decisions.
Right.
But also, if your body doesn't have, crazy amounts of cortisol flying around when you don't really need it, it is in a better position to heal.
Excellent. So jumping in another direction, but related, another field of expertise that you have is the peptide world. And let's talk about that a little bit, because this is very exciting, and it may be new for a lot of people. It was new to me over the last 2 years, and I've been able to actually use some of these peptides in an incredibly effective way. Healing a rotator cuff injury, for example. I never thought I'd be able to do that, be a physical therapy and peptide usage, and it's an MRI confirmed, speaking of evidence-based. So could you tell maybe a quick introduction into bioregulators and peptides for the audience so that they...
Yeah, I mean, it's a big, big topic, right? So the first thing I'm going to say to your audience, if many of you are new to this space, just know that the first things you need to do, the first things you want to do, is dial in your food, your sleep, your stress management, your movement, and your exercise. So that's a foundation, right?
Yes.
Once you've got that foundation set, we can start to think about things that are maybe more 2.0, as it were, right? And in this space of peptides and bioregulators, we definitely have a lot of very interesting tools that can tap into the body's ability to heal itself. And that's what's very exciting to a lot of people, well, to everybody, about peptides and bioregulators. So to explain to people what a peptide is and what a bioregulator is. So peptides are essentially, they're small proteins, right? For a lot of people, they're 50 amino acids or less, but they can be up to 100 amino acids or less. It kind of depends who you're talking to and what definition you're using. An amino acid, for people who don't know, is the building blocks of protein. So these small protein chains they're signaling molecules in the body. So the peptide, I would guess that the peptide that you used to help your shoulder to heal is the classic. It's BPC 157.
Correct. With TB500.
With TB500. So the tricky thing about these, just so the audience is aware, these are not approved by the FDA for human use at this stage of the game. They've been around a really long time, but nobody's been able to, because there's no real pharmaceutical company that's kind of gotten a hold of it, nobody's really done the work to run all of the different trials that would be needed to ascertain that they're definitely safe for human use. There's a lot of research on them, though. right? And the other thing that complicates things with BPC is that it is so wide acting in the body. It has so many different effects. Like it's been shown to be, certainly in animal studies and in cases like yours, it's very powerful for healing soft tissue. It can help heal bones. It can help with skin wounds, like really with surgical wounds. It has very powerful healing properties for burns, for example. It has it also has a lot of properties for the eye, although in that case they have to be compounded into eye drops. It's powerful for the brain. Its superpower is for healing the gut. It's anti-inflammatory. It helps with pain. Like it's just really a very, very, the technical term for it, it's very pleiotropic, right? So pleiotropic means it has many, many, many different uses.
Right.
The fact of the matter is that you have receptors for it all over your body, and it is a fragment of a naturally occurring protein that we produce and secrete in our guts.
Okay, so we actually have the building blocks of this already.
Well, it already exists. It's just that when it's synthesized in a lab and reintroduced therapeutically, all of a sudden it can up the game, right? And it can be used. I mean, it's an interesting peptide because it can be used orally, it can be used topically, and it can be used by subcutaneous injection, which I'm guessing is probably how you use it.
Correct. That's correct. In the interest of the audience, these are research peptides, like
Research
you mentioned,
chemicals.
research chemicals.
But the oral ones seem to be getting by. So, and the oral BPC, for example, can be quite good for the gut. And in some cases, it wouldn't have healed your shoulder. But I've seen a lot of people who have like kind of minor aches and pains who will take BPC orally and say, oh, wow, like my knee feels better or my hand feels, whatever the case may be. And in that case, sometimes it's because it's not a very acute injury, but it was due to inflammation, or maybe, it helped the gut to heal itself. So now we have less proteins traveling through the gut lumen into the circulation that don't belong there, that would kind of irritate the immune system and drive that inflammatory cascade. So if we can heal the gut, maybe the BPC is just helping with that. So there's lots of different mechanisms of action. So BPC 157 is just one of these, of this whole family. The bioregulators are essentially a subset of peptides, and they're really tiny. They're 2 to 4, maybe 5 amino acids in length. Their superpower is that they can get into the cell, they can get into the nucleus, they bind to DNA, and they restore the DNA's ability to produce proteins that are needed to rejuvenate and to restore function to tissues, glands, and organs at a cellular level. So the way I often describe bioregulators to people is that if you could imagine that you look at a tire, and the tread on the tire, as you drive, it starts to wear down, so you lose your grip, it doesn't work as well. With a bioregulator, you're restoring the tread on the tire. So you're restoring function to the liver or the pancreas or the lungs, or there's one for the blood vessels or the heart or the kidneys. So it's they kind of speak to all the different systems and organs in the body. And what's amazing about them, and the reason why they are very often considered to have a much higher safety profile than even peptides, is that they are modulatory. So they don't boost and they don't suppress, they just normalize.
Beautiful. That's a great explanation, by the way, because I've always struggled a little bit with the bioregulator definition.
Well, a lot of people do. I mean, somebody just put out a book recently. I've never even heard of this person, and they threw BPC 157 as a bioregulator, and I'm like, no,
not really.
So much. To begin with, it has 15 amino acids, so it's too many amino acids. That doesn't mean that BPC 157 doesn't sometimes also affect genetic expression of certain genes, but it doesn't do it by binding to DNA. It does it as a signaling molecule.
Gotcha. So another thing that maybe, again, from an introductory standpoint for our audience, I am sure most people who watch this podcast are familiar with GLP-1s. Everyone is familiar with GLP-1s now.
Yeah.
So GLP-1s, are they technically a peptide or okay, so they are. Yeah. So just to be clear, That's
Yeah, I
something.
mean, it's a peptide that's, again, it's naturally occurring in your gut. What happened there is the pharmaceutical companies, when they were studying what this GLP-1 molecule does, the thing when you secrete GLP-1 in your gut, it's there for seconds, maybe a
Right.
couple of minutes. So I'm sure some scientists sat there and said, if we could just make it last longer, imagine what could happen.
Right.
And lo and behold, they've modified these compounds so that they last 6 days. So now
see.
you have a 6-day effect. That's why you can take, like whether it's semaglutide or tirzepatide. So semaglutide brand name people will know as Ozempic.
Right.
Or the tirzepatide brand name people will know as Mounjaro. These compounds are used once a week.
Right.
Right? And so they have a half-life of 6 days. And on day 7, people usually take their next dose.
Right. Right. And that's, of course, the standard, if you will, use case. I know some researchers who have tried microdosing, for example, in order to kind of maintain that dose throughout more steadily. It's different approaches, I guess.
I honestly, I'm not a big fan of that personally.
Oh, okay.
I think they were designed to be used for a week. And people will say to me, well, Nat, by day 6, I start to feel hungry again, and I feel like I'm
that's it.
eating more. And I think that's a good thing, right? I think that being in a constant state of deprivation might have some metabolic downsides. So would it be better possibly you're going to eat a lot less for 5 or 6 days, and then for 1 or 2 days you might eat more. And so now the brain is not sitting there thinking you're stuck in starvation, right? And so,
Great point.
Not to mention the fact that we want to offset the possibility of losing muscle, which is a big conversation around the GLP-1s. And so if I can give your audience one piece of advice is if you're going to tap into Ozempic or Mounjaro to help you to release extra weight, you must exercise. You must lift heavy weights.
Yes.
And you must eat your protein first. So you want
Absolutely.
to give your body every opportunity, every reason to maintain and build muscle, and you want to offer it all of the materials that it needs to do that. Because if you don't provide the proper inputs to build muscle, as you're, because you're calorically deficient,
Right.
the body's just going to dump.
It needs energy.
And energy, right? So the cool thing is that, the Ozempic is really people are really starting to realize that Ozempic it wasn't the first one that came out, but it's the first one that really made a lot of noise.
Right.
It is definitely not, like, Mounjaro is a huge improvement on Ozempic.
Right.
People tend to be less constipated, they're less tired, they are less nauseous.
Right.
Tirzepatide or Mounjaro has really elevated the game, and there's triple agonists coming down the pipes. There's all kinds of new guys coming down into the
Yeah, I heard I'm familiar with retatrutide, I believe, which is the GLP-3. Is that correct?
Yeah. So there's a triple incretin.
Right, and I heard noise, again, through the grapevine, that there may be even 4 antagonists, 5 ones, possibly in the future.
It'll be interesting to see how they work, right?
Right.
I think those are much newer. I think that the GLP-1s have been studied for a lot longer.
Right.
And so, I think a couple of things to remember. Number one, what I said, the protein and the exercise are non-negotiables.
Right.
And hydration.
Absolutely.
Right? Your nutrient density is really important because you're going to be eating less food. Make sure that the food that you eat is very nutrient dense. So that means if you have to have a green shake every day, if you have to have protein shakes every day, if you have to use essential amino acids every day because you're not that hungry,
Right.
make sure you're bringing so that your body doesn't end up starving of micronutrients.
So your volume now counts.
Exactly. So you've got to get more into less, right?
Right.
Do not make the mistake of figuring out that you can eat bonbons and donuts and still lose weight, because you will look like crap. You
Yeah,
will
yeah.
feel like crap and you will look like crap. And the minute you stop using these compounds, the weight will come back with a bunch of friends.
Right. And the other thing to keep in mind, and please correct me, you're the expert if I'm wrong, is the potential for insulin sensitivity, right? If you start eating a bunch of sugar because you're not hungry, so you figure that it's going to be sugar instead of protein, now you're introducing extra sugar into
Well,
process.
this is where it gets interesting. I think that the GLP-1s, they will improve your insulin sensitivity.
Right. Right.
Right out of the gate. So I think that they, even in the face of sugar, it'll help your body to do a better job with the sugar.
Oh, okay.
The problem is
Even
that
better.
the problem is you're also asking your pancreas to work a lot harder. And we know that one of the black box warnings on these compounds is pancreatitis, which, quite apart from being wildly painful, is also a dangerous condition. Like, people who've had pancreatitis are at a much higher risk of pancreatic cancer down the road.
Right.
You don't want to go there, right?
Right.
So when I'm talking to people who are using these compounds, I'm like, we want to baby the pancreas. So if we're babying the pancreas, we're not eating excess sugar, and we're also maybe trying to think that maybe alcohol is not our friend. It's not our
Right.
friend for a million different reasons.
Absolutely.
It's especially not your friend now, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
So if used properly, they can help you to build, and if you're working with a good coach, you can come out of this with more muscle, with better eating habits, and a better body, because now if you have more muscle,
Right.
you're automatically going to have more places for your body to store glucose as glycogen. You're going to have better energy to do your workouts. You're now starting to spin up instead of being in that downward spiral that you were in when you started.
And this is where that human optimization idea comes in, right? Of becoming better, becoming more efficient at these positive feedback loops in the body.
And so the other thing I'll say is, so for the people who microdose every single day, in my mind, because of the way they were developed, and look, there's doctors out there that do recommend this, so I'm not saying it's wrong.
Right.
I'm just saying my preference is to have someone use, let's say, half a starting dose once a week, and see if you can work with that. So the least you want to use the least amount of the compound that will give you the effect.
So minimum effective dose is what you're talking about.
Minimum effective dose. The problem I see happening also with people is they're like, oh, well, I'm losing weight at this dose. If I take more, then I'm going to lose more weight. And all you're doing is you're running the chance, number one, of your body becoming resistant to it. I've seen people literally stall completely because their dose is too high and they have to back down again. And why? It didn't take you 10 minutes to get to where you are today. So give yourself a chance, give your body the chance to reset its set points, to release the weight, to build the muscle, to heal the system, to release the inflammation. Slow and steady wins the race. Period.
Absolutely. So one topic I wanted to just, again, high level, we have a limited amount of time, but I did want to mention it because it has, again, popped up in the popular consciousness, and a lot of people have talked about it, is the longevity aspect of all this. Mm-hmm. The pro-longevity, anti-aging, I guess is where I'm going with that. Examples, for example, Brian Johnson is the famous example nowadays, with his protocol. I think it's called The Blueprint or something. I saw the Netflix special. My wife was like, oh, you have to look at this.
Yeah.
And then, of course, Chris Hemsworth had a special on National Geographic called Limitless, which he explores a lot of these topics also, of how to optimize and or fight aging. What are you, again, keeping our audience in mind, how would you kind of give them an introduction as to this field and what it looks like in the future? What do you think is coming?
Yeah, I think there's a lot of really interesting and fascinating things happening in this field of longevity. I don't love the anti-aging term particularly. Mm-hmm. I think we're going to age. I think what we want to do is age well. I also think we're at a very exciting time. I think regenerative medicine, where you have things like stem cells and exosomes and people doing fascinating work that can help to regenerate cartilage. Like, we can really start to think about keeping the body in a much better state for much longer so that we can live longer, healthier, more vital lives. And that's really the goal, right?
Right.
The lengths to which the guys like Brian Johnson are going is amazing if you're a millionaire. To me, I look at the guy, it doesn't seem to me like he's having a whole lot of fun. I hope he is.
Yeah, of course.
I hope he's having more fun than he looks like he's having.
I hope he has a good return on investment.
I think, he's doing all right. But I think we all need to strike a balance, right? I think that we need to stop thinking like a toddler and only do things because they feel good right now.
Oh, good point.
Right? So we want to find a balance between leading a fun, full life, because joy is a big piece of longevity,
yes.
whether we talk about it or not. And at the same time, I know people that interpret that as saying, well, then in that case, I'm just going to have a bottle of wine every night because it makes me happy and I like the taste of it. And I'm like, well, now you're making a decision like a toddler, because
right.
you can't
it's
have
the all or nothing mentality, right? Either I'm going to have all the fun or no one has fun.
Exactly. And so we know that there are no benefits to alcohol. You can talk about resveratrol till the cows come home. There's no need to have a glass of wine to get it.
Agreed.
Is one glass of wine going to kill you? No. But we're all going to have to strike a balance. But I would say that your body is your freaking temple, whether you realize it or not. Mm-hmm. Take care of this gift that you were given. Feed it properly, water it properly, move it, exercise it, sleep, manage your stress. Get those things down so that they become a lifestyle, so that it becomes the way you live. Then you can add on any of these optimization things. If you have the means, stem cells, exosomes, all of those things are amazing. But you know what? The low-hanging fruit is the free stuff. Right?
So we're talking sleep, recovery, good nutrition, exercise, movement, right? In a healthy way.
And exercise and movement are different, right?
Right.
Exercise is challenging your body on a regular basis, cardiovascularly, and not too much. This is the thing. There's a sweet spot for every one of these things, right?
For sure. Overtraining is a thing.
Overtraining is a thing. It's aging.
Yeah.
It's a paradox. You want to be a marathon runner? Great. But guess what? It's aging. Marathon runners don't typically live. They're not the centenarians. The centenarians are the guys that are the sheep herders that are walking up and down hills every single day.
The blue zone people.
Exactly.
Gotcha. Okay.
And community is a massive piece of the puzzle.
Mm-hmm.
Right? So having a community of people that you resonate with, that support you, that bring you joy, that you bring joy to, all of these things are really important. The narrative around the Brian Johnsons and those guys, if you want to live a science experiment, of course, go for it. But understand that there's going to be a cost to that.
Agreed.
Right? And philosophically, I feel like I want to live my best life for as long as possible. I want to be healthy and vital until very short time before I leave this world, so that I can contribute in any way that I can, right?
I think so many people get wrapped up on this perhaps as a very, perhaps American, perhaps human thing of that we get so focused on the performance aspect and the superlative that we forget the longevity balance, if you will. Like a lot of my friends who are in the fitness space seem to forget that when you train for that ultimate performance, to be a high performer, there is a cost from a longevity standpoint. Running backs don't tend to be 90 years old. No. Or boxers, for example. They're extreme athletes, perfect for their field and high performing, but there is that cost.
Well, they pay a very heavy price, right? On brain health, they pay a massive price there.
Right.
So I think you have to think about your long-term goal, and that's a hard thing because humans are really wired for immediate pleasure.
Yes, we are. Yeah, delayed gratification is not a thing.
We're really bad at projecting into the future. We get better at it as we get older and we start to realize, oh crap, I am getting older. Oh dear.
Yeah.
That's when you start to think about it. But I think that, if you can find that balance for yourself to do all the things that you can do, make them pleasurable, find people that share the same interests as you. Here's the thing, if you're going to adopt a really healthy lifestyle and you're going to say goodbye to the booze and the whole thing, the bad news is there may be a point where you need to find a new group of friends, because if you hang out with people who love to smoke and drink wine and party, you're not going to feel, it's going to be hard for you to be in that world. So
yeah, it's one of those, like, you hear those Instagram like memes or cliches of, like, the people that surround you will influence, everything you do. And sometimes if you find yourself in a conversation where you have nothing to talk to with this group of friends, perhaps you do need a new group of friends.
Yeah, which sounds weird when the first thing I said was community. You need community and you need friends, and you do.
Well, you need the right community.
Exactly. Like, surround yourselves with the people who are going to support you in the choices that you make.
Absolutely. Those who are like-minded and so forth. So, okay, so let's talk about, if our audience is interested in this, which they should be if they paid attention to the show. Can you tell us, what would they look for from you? What is available? What do you have to offer? Please let us know. Share with the audience, if you would.
Sure. So, I mean, look, one good place to start is the podcast, Longevity with Nathalie Niddam. Pick and choose your episodes, because there are some episodes where we go pretty deep into the weeds. So,
Gotcha.
I've got a lot of introductory episodes. I've got a bioregulator intro episode. Like, I just peruse the list. I think there's now 300 episodes out. So
wow.
there's a lot of material.
Yeah, no, you've been at this for a while, and thank you for it.
My pleasure. I do, there is a Facebook community. I don't spend a lot of time in there anymore. It's gotten really big and a little bit cuckoo in there.
I've been there.
Yeah. And, right now it's called Biohacking Superhuman Performance, I think, BSP. I think it's going to be changing to Longevity with Nat pretty soon. Okay. And then I have, if people really want to get into this and they really want to lean in, I would say, and they're willing to make a bit of an investment, then join my membership community. And that's where, I do live Q&As every week, well, most weeks, or I bring in an expert to do a talk. So next week, for example, we have the founder and formulator of a company called Healthgevity that has incredible supplements. So he's coming into the group. He's going to talk for a little while, and then he's just going to rapid fire answer everybody's questions kind of thing. So that's a pretty cool community. It's closed right now until Feb 1, but we're going to reopen it on Feb 1st. So if people are interested, the way to find your way to all this stuff, just go to nathalieniddam.com.
Okay.
So I'm going to apologize now for my website. It is sorely in need of an overhaul, and it's currently getting it in the background. So there will be a new website soon. But at least there, you'll find all the information. You can sign up for my newsletter. I'm hosting a medical retreat at the end of March in Sedona.
Oh, wow.
Anybody's interested in that, in December, I did a solo I think it was December or November of last year. I did a solo episode and talked about the retreat.
I think I listened to that one. It was very interesting. That one? Yes, ma'am.
Yeah, it's pretty interesting. So there's some pretty cool stuff in there. So, lots of different ways, lots of free stuff. And for people who are wanting to step it up a little bit, not free.
It can be the start of a beautiful journey. By the way, all of this information will be in the show notes on the bottom, so folks can peruse and click and start learning. And okay, any final thoughts, any advice you might want to leave our audience with?
I think my advice is try not to get overwhelmed. If you're new to this, start at the beginning. Think about your life. Think about, okay, what's the one place where I know I could really use a change, right? Maybe it's your diet. Maybe it's you're that person that sits and scrolls on their phone till 2:00 in the morning every night. Find one thing and change the one thing.
Right.
And then go after the other thing. And there's so many great resources out there. If diet is something that you need some work on, there's a really great free 30-day program called the Whole 30 that will will coach you through releasing, letting go of all the processed foods, all the packaged stuff, and just eating real food, nothing crazy.
Right, just real food.
And give yourself the opportunity to see, how do I feel? And then
Right.
you can make a decision from there.
Do I want to stick with this, or do I really need those Cheetos?
Exactly. Like, wow, like I've had people say to me, wow, like my hands don't hurt or my knees don't hurt.
My
And
skin looks good.
my skin looks amazing. I'm sleeping better. I have better energy. So give yourself that, like all the stuff that you think are so important to you right now, they'll still be there.
Right.
Right? They'll be there in 30 days, but just for 30 days. And if you live with someone, see if you can get them in the game with you, because there's nothing worse than trying to do something in your house while somebody's sitting there eating Cheetos and drinking vodka.
That's true. That is that is so true. I'm so glad. Like my wife got me on this journey, so
Yeah.
I can vouch for that for sure.
For sure.
Well, Nathalie, thank you so much for your time. It has been an absolute pleasure, and maybe in the future you can come back. I would love to hear what you're up to, what new things you might want to share with the audience, what new discoveries you found, and what new projects are exciting and that you're bringing to the world. So that would be great.
Absolutely.
So,
Thank you.
absolutely. Well, with that, audience, thank you so much. This is Rice41 signing off. Like, subscribe, all the usual things. And remember, always assess, adapt, overcome. And thank you so much for watching.
Thanks, Gonzalo.